Tamara Williams walked into the courthouse that Tuesday morning with her head held high. She wore her best dress, a navy blue one she had bought from a thrift store 2 years ago. It was clean and pressed, though the fabric was starting to show, wear at the edges. Her black shoes clicked softly on the marble floor as she made her way through the metal detector. The security guard looked at her with tired eyes. He had seen thousands of people pass through these doors. Most came here when they were in trouble. Some were scared, others were angry, a few were hopeful. Tamara fell into the last group. Though she had every reason to be in the first two, she was here because of a traffic ticket. 3 weeks ago, she had been driving home from her night job at the diner when a police officer pulled her over. Her car registration had expired by 2 days. She had forgotten to renew it because she was so busy with work and school. The officer gave her a ticket for $250. $250 might not seem like much to some people, but for Tamara, it was huge. She was a single mother raising her 6-year-old daughter, Maya. She worked at Joe's Diner during the day, making $7 an hour plus tips. At night, she attended law school. Her student loans barely covered tuition. Every dollar mattered in her small world. Tamara had tried to pay the fine in smaller amounts. She called the court office 3 times. Each time, they told her the same thing: pay the full amount or come to court. So here she was, hoping the judge would understand her situation and let her pay in installments. The courtroom was busy that morning. About 30 people sat in the wooden benches waiting for their cases to be called. Some wore suits, others wore jeans and t-shirts. A few looked like they had slept in their clothes. Tamara took a seat in the 3rd row and waited. Judge Richard Harrison sat behind the big wooden desk at the front of the room. He was 62 years old and had been a judge for 23 years. His hair was gray and thin. His face looked like he had stopped smiling years ago. People in the courthouse called him Hanging Harrison because he gave out harsh sentences. Officer Martinez stood near the side wall. He was 38 years old and had been with the police force for 15 years. He was tall and thick around the middle. His uniform was always perfect. His badge always shined. He took his job very seriously, maybe too seriously. The morning went by slowly. One by one, people went before the judge. Most paid their fines and left. A few argued and got bigger fines. One man got sent to jail for 30 days because he could not pay at all. "Tamara Williams," the clerk called out. Tamara stood up and walked to the front of the courtroom. Her heart was beating fast. She had practiced what she would say. She would be polite and respectful. She would explain her situation calmly. She would ask for the chance to pay the fine over 3 months. "You are charged with driving with an expired registration," Judge Harrison said without looking up from his papers. "How do you plead?" "Guilty, Your Honor," Tamara said. "But I would like to explain my situation and ask for a payment plan." Judge Harrison finally looked up. His eyes were cold and blue. "The fine is $250. Can you pay it today?" "No, Your Honor. I am a single mother and a student. I work 2 jobs, but I still do not make much money. Could I please pay it in 3 payments? I can pay $85 today and the rest over the next 2 months." "The law does not care about your personal problems," Judge Harrison said. "You had a legal duty to keep your registration current. You failed to do that. The fine is $250 due today." Tamara felt her face get hot. She had expected the judge to be strict, but she hoped he would also be fair. "Your Honor, I understand I made a mistake. I am not trying to avoid paying. I just need a little time. I have my daughter to think about. If I pay all of this today, we will not have money for food this week." "That is not the court's problem," Judge Harrison said. His voice was getting louder. "You should have thought about that before you broke the law." "But Your Honor," Tamara said, her own voice rising slightly, "I only forgot to renew it by 2 days. I was working double shifts to pay for my law school books. I am trying to make a better life for my daughter and myself. Surely the court can show some understanding for someone who is trying to better themselves?" The courtroom was getting quiet. People were starting to stare. Judge Harrison's face was turning red. He did not like it when people argued with him. In his courtroom, Officer Martinez stepped forward. He had been watching the whole thing. In his mind, this woman was being disrespectful to the judge. She was raising her voice. She was arguing. Someone needed to put her in her place. "Ma'am, you need to lower your voice," Officer Martinez said loudly. "This is a courtroom, not your living room." Tamara turned to look at him. "I am not yelling," she said. "I am just trying to explain my situation to the judge." "You are being disruptive," Officer Martinez said. He moved closer to her. "The judge has made his decision, accept it and move on." "I have the right to speak in court," Tamara said. She was getting frustrated now. "I am not being disruptive. I am asking for fairness." That was when it happened. Officer Martinez took 2 quick steps toward Tamara. Before anyone could react, his right hand swung through the air and struck her across the left cheek. The sound echoed through the silent courtroom like a gunshot. Tamara stumbled backward. Her hand flew to her face. Her cheek burned with pain and shock. For a moment, she could not believe what had just happened. A police officer had just slapped her in open court. The courtroom erupted. People gasped and stood up. Someone screamed. A few people pulled out their phones and started recording. One woman in the back row was a reporter for the local news station. She had been there covering another case. Now she was witnessing something that would make headlines. "Order! Order!" Judge Harrison banged his gavel hard, but he did not say anything to Officer Martinez. He did not ask if Tamara was okay. He did not apologize for what had happened in his courtroom. Tamara stood there with her hand on her cheek. Tears were starting to form in her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of anger and humiliation. In front of all these people, a police officer had hit her for the crime of asking for fairness. "Remove this woman from my courtroom," Judge Harrison said to Officer Martinez. "She is clearly unable to conduct herself properly." 2 more officers appeared from nowhere. They took Tamara by the arms and started walking her toward the door. She did not resist. She was too shocked to fight back. As they let her out, she could hear people talking and phones clicking as they took pictures and videos. The whole thing had taken less than 5 minutes. Tamara had come to court hoping for understanding. Instead, she was leaving with a burning cheek and a memory that would change her life forever. Outside the courthouse, Tamara sat on the steps and cried. Not because her cheek hurt, though it did. Not because she still owed $250, though she did. She cried because she had just learned a hard lesson about how the world really worked for people like her. But as she sat there, something else was growing inside her, something stronger than sadness or fear. It was determination. If this was how the system treated people, then the system needed to change. And maybe, just maybe, she could be part of that change. Tamara sat on the courthouse steps for 20 minutes before she felt ready to drive home. Her left cheek still burned where Officer Martinez had hit her. Every few seconds, she touched it gently with her fingers. The skin was tender and slightly swollen. People walked past her on their way in and out of the courthouse. Some stared at her with curious eyes. Others pretended not to see her. A few looked at her with sympathy, as if they knew what had happened inside. Word was already spreading through the building about the incident in Judge Harrison's courtroom. Inside the courthouse, the reporter from Channel 7 News was making phone calls. Her name was Jessica Chen, and she had been covering court cases for 8 years. She had seen judges be mean to people. She had seen lawyers get angry. She had even seen people get arrested in courtrooms, but she had never seen a police officer slap someone during a hearing. Jessica had recorded the whole thing on her phone. The video was clear, and the sound was good. She could see Tamara trying to explain her situation to the judge. She could hear Officer Martinez telling Tamara to lower her voice. Most importantly, she had captured the moment when his hand struck Tamara's face. "This is huge," Jessica said to her editor on the phone. "I need to get this on the evening news. This woman was just asking for a payment plan for a traffic ticket. The officer hit her for no good reason." While Jessica was planning her news story, Tamara was driving home to her small apartment. She lived in Riverside Gardens, a group of old apartment buildings on the east side of town. The buildings were not pretty, but they were clean and safe. More importantly, they were cheap enough for someone like Tamara to afford. Maya was at the apartment of Mrs. Rodriguez, their elderly neighbor who watched her after school. Mrs. Rodriguez was a kind woman who had raised 5 children of her own. She loved Maya like her own granddaughter and never asked for much money to babysit. Tamara parked her old Honda Civic in front of the building. The car had 200,000 miles on it and needed new tires. But it ran, and that was what mattered. She looked at herself in the rearview mirror. Her cheek was red and slightly puffy. She tried to cover it with makeup from her purse, but the swelling still showed. She knocked on Mrs. Rodriguez's door. The old woman opened it with a smile, but her expression changed when she saw Tamara's face. "Mija, what happened to you?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked in her thick accent. She had moved to America from Mexico 40 years ago, but she still mixed Spanish words into her English. "I had some trouble at the courthouse," Tamara said quietly. "Is Maya ready to come home?" Mrs. Rodriguez looked at her with concern, but she did not ask more questions. She called for Maya, who came running to the door with her backpack and a big smile. "Mommy," Maya said, hugging Tamara's legs. "Mrs. Rodriguez helped me with my math homework. I got all the problems right." "That's wonderful, baby," Tamara said, trying to sound normal. "Let's go home and you can show me." They walked down the hall to their apartment. It was small, just 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, and a living room that connected to the kitchen. Maya slept in the bedroom, and Tamara slept on a fold-out couch in the living room. It was not much, but it was theirs. Maya went to watch cartoons on their old television while Tamara started making dinner. She moved slowly, still feeling shaky from what had happened. As she stirred a pot of spaghetti sauce, she kept thinking about Officer Martinez's face right before he hit her. He had looked so angry, so sure that he was right to hurt her. At 6 o'clock, Tamara turned on the local news while they ate dinner. She was not sure if Jessica Chen would use the story, so, quickly but she wanted to know, she did not have to wait long. "Good evening, I'm David Roberts," the news anchor said. "Our top story tonight. A shocking incident at the county courthouse has people asking serious questions about police behavior and courtroom procedures." Tamara's heart started beating faster. Maya was focused on her spaghetti and not paying attention to the television. Warning. The video you are about to see may be disturbing to some viewers, David Roberts continued. Earlier today, a woman appeared in court to request a payment plan for a traffic fine. What happened next was captured on cell phone video by our own Jessica Chen, who was covering another story. The video started playing. Tamara watched herself on television standing in front of Judge Harrison's desk. She could hear her own voice, asking for a payment plan. She looked so hopeful, so sure that the judge would understand her situation. Then she watched Officer Martinez step forward. She saw herself turn to look at him, and then she watched his hand swing across her face. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Mommy, what's wrong?" Maya asked, looking up from her dinner. "Nothing, baby. Just something on TV." Tamara quickly changed the channel to a Cartoon Network, but her phone was already starting to ring. The first call was from her best friend Carmen, who lived across town. "Tamara, I just saw you on the news. Are you okay? What happened?" Before Tamara could answer, another call came in. Then another. Within an hour, her phone rang 15 times. The story was spreading fast. By 8 o'clock, the video was on social media. Someone had recorded it from their television and posted it on Facebook. Within minutes, people were sharing it. Then someone put it on Twitter, then Instagram, then TikTok. The comments started pouring in. "This is disgusting. That officer should be fired. Poor woman was just trying to pay her fine. This is police brutality. Judge Harrison just sat there and let it happen. He's just as bad as the cop. This woman is a hero for staying calm. I would have fought back." By 10 o'clock that night, the video had been viewed 50,000 times. News stations in other cities were picking up the story. Radio talk show hosts were discussing it. Even some national news websites were starting to write articles about what happened in Judge Harrison's courtroom. Tamara put Maya to bed and sat down at her kitchen table with her law school books. She had a test on Thursday in constitutional law, and she needed to study. But she could not focus on the words on the page. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Officer Martinez's hand coming toward her face. Her phone kept buzzing with text messages and calls from numbers she did not recognize. Reporters were trying to reach her for interviews. Lawyers were offering to represent her for free. Civil rights groups were asking if she wanted to file a complaint. She turned off her phone and tried to study, but it was no use. Her mind kept wandering to what had happened that morning. In the space of 5 minutes, her life had changed completely. She was no longer just Tamara Williams, law student and single mother. She was now the woman who got slapped by a police officer in court. Around midnight, she gave up trying to study and lay down on her fold-out couch. Through the thin walls of the apartment, she could hear Mrs. Rodriguez's television still playing. She could hear cars driving by on the street outside. She could hear the normal sounds of life going on around her, but nothing felt normal anymore. As she lay there in the dark, Tamara thought about her future. Tomorrow, she would have to go to work at the diner. People would stare at her. They would ask questions. Some would be kind and supportive. Others would whisper behind her back. She thought about law school. Would her professors treat her differently now? Would other students look at her as a victim or as a troublemaker? Most of all, she thought about Maya. Her daughter was only 6 years old, but she was smart. Eventually, she would see the video. She would learn what happened to her mother. What would that do to a little girl's faith in the world? But as Tamara lay there in the darkness, something else was growing inside her heart. The humiliation was real, and it hurt deeply. But there was also something else. A burning sense of injustice that was bigger than her own pain. She was not the first person Officer Martinez had probably treated badly. She would not be the last unless someone did something about it. Judge Harrison had allowed it to happen in his courtroom. How many other people had he failed to protect? The video that was spreading across the internet was embarrassing and painful for her to watch. But it was also proof. Proof that the system was broken. Proof that people like her were not treated with dignity and respect. Proof that something needed to change. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Tamara made a promise to herself. She would not let this moment define her as a victim. Instead, she would use it as fuel to become something more powerful. An agent of change. Tamara woke up the next morning to the sound of her phone buzzing. She had turned it back on to use as an alarm clock, and now it would not stop ringing. When she looked at the screen, she saw 37 missed calls and 82 text messages. The story had exploded overnight. Maya was still sleeping in the bedroom, so Tamara made coffee quietly and sat at her small kitchen table. She opened her laptop and searched for her name on the internet. What she found made her stomach drop. The video was everywhere. It was on news websites across the country. Someone had put it on YouTube and it already had 500,000 views. There were articles with headlines like, "Police officer slaps woman in courthouse and judge allows assault in his own courtroom." Most of the comments were supportive of her, but some were not. A few people wrote mean things about how she looked or how she talked. Others said she must have done something to deserve being hit. Reading those comments hurt almost as much as the slap itself. But many more people were angry about what happened to her. Civil rights lawyers were calling it a clear case of police brutality. Community leaders were demanding that Officer Martinez be fired and that Judge Harrison face discipline. The mayor's office had already announced they would investigate the incident. Around 7 in the morning, Maya woke up and came to the kitchen for breakfast. She was wearing her favorite pajamas with cartoon cats on them. She looked so small and innocent that Tamara's heart ached. "Mommy, why do you look sad?" Maya asked as Tamara poured cereal into a bowl. "I just didn't sleep very well, baby," Tamara said. "But I'm okay." As Maya ate her breakfast, Tamara's phone rang again. This time it was Carmen, her best friend. "Girl, you need to turn on Channel 7 right now," Carmen said without even saying hello. "They're talking about you again." Tamara turned on the television while Maya finished eating. The morning news was showing the video again, but this time they had a panel of experts discussing it. "This is a clear violation of this woman's civil rights," said a lawyer who worked for the ACLU. "No one should Be physically assaulted for asking a judge for a payment plan. This officer should be fired and charged with assault. I agree, said a former police chief. I've been in law enforcement for 30 years, and I've never seen anything like this. There was no justification for Officer Martinez to put his hands on this woman. Tamara turned off the television before Maya could understand what they were talking about. She got her daughter ready for school and walked her to the bus stop like she did every morning. But today felt different. Some of the other parents stared at her. A few whispered to each other when they thought she was not looking. Mrs. Johnson, whose son was in Maya's class, came over to talk to her. Tamara, I saw the news last night, she said quietly. I am so sorry that happened to you. If you need anything, please let me know. Thank you, Tamara said. I appreciate that. When the school bus came, Maya gave her mother a big hug and climbed on board. Tamara watched the bus drive away and felt a wave of sadness. She worried that other kids at school might say something to Maya about the video. Tamara drove to Joe's diner where she had worked for 3 years. Joe was a good boss who treated his employees fairly. The diner was popular with working people who wanted good food at low prices. Tamara knew most of the regular customers by name. When she walked through the front door, the entire restaurant went quiet. Everyone was looking at her. Joe came out from behind the counter and put his arm around her shoulders. You okay, kid? He asked. Joe always called her kid, even though she was 28 years old. I'm fine, Joe. Ready to work. Look, if you want to take a few days off, I understand. This has got to be tough on you. No, I need to work. I need the money and I need to keep busy. For the first hour, every customer who came in stared at her. Some were kind and told her they supported her. Others just whispered to each other and pointed. But by lunchtime, things started to feel more normal. Around 2 o'clock, a man in an expensive suit came into the diner. He ordered coffee and sat at one of Tamara's tables. When she brought him his drink, he handed her a business card. Ms. Williams, my name is Robert Chen. I'm a civil rights lawyer. I'd like to talk to you about filing a lawsuit against the police department and the court system. Tamara looked at the card. It was thick and fancy, with gold letters. She had never held a business card that looked so expensive. I don't know if I want to sue anyone, she said. I just want this to go away. Ms. Williams, what happened to you was wrong. If we don't fight back, it will keep happening to other people. You have a chance to make a real difference. Tamara put the card in her pocket and went back to work, but she kept thinking about what the lawyer said. Did she really have a chance to make a difference? After work, she picked up Maya from Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment. Her neighbor was excited to see her. Mija, you are famous. My daughter in California called me. She saw you on the news there too. She says you are a hero for standing up to that judge. I don't feel like a hero, Tamara said. I feel embarrassed. No, Mrs. Rodriguez said firmly. You asked for fairness, and they treated you badly. Now the whole world can see how they treat people like us. That is important. That evening, after Maya went to bed, Tamara sat at her kitchen table with her law books. She had missed yesterday's studying because of everything that happened. Now she was behind in her reading for several classes. She opened her constitutional law textbook to the chapter on civil rights. As she read about the 14th Amendment and equal protection under the law, she kept thinking about what happened in Judge Harrison's courtroom. The book talked about cases where people had fought for their rights in court. It told stories of brave individuals who had challenged unfair laws and cruel treatment. Many of these people had been ordinary citizens who found themselves in extraordinary situations. Tamara read about Rosa Parks, who refused to give up her bus seat and sparked the Montgomery bus boycott. She read about Ruby Bridges, who walked through angry crowds to attend an all-white school. She read about countless others who had faced humiliation and danger to fight for justice. These people had not planned to become heroes. They were just ordinary people who found themselves in situations where they had to choose between accepting injustice or fighting back. Around midnight, Tamara closed her textbook and walked to the window of her small apartment. The street outside was quiet, except for the occasional car driving by. Most of her neighbors were asleep, getting ready for another day of work. She thought about her life before yesterday, She had been focused on getting through law school and providing for Maya. She worked hard, studied hard, and tried to stay out of trouble. She had goals and dreams, but they were small and personal. Now everything was different. The video of her being slapped had been seen by millions of people. Reporters wanted to interview her. Lawyers wanted to represent her. Civil rights groups wanted her to become a symbol of their cause. The attention was overwhelming and scary. She was a private person who liked to keep to herself. The idea of being in the public eye made her uncomfortable. But as she stood at her window, looking out at the quiet street, Tamara realized something important. What happened to her was not really about her. It was about a system that treated poor people and people of color differently than everyone else. Officer Martinez had hit her because he knew he could get away with it. Judge Harrison had allowed it because he did not see her as someone who mattered. They both thought she was powerless and that no one would care what happened to her. They were wrong. The video had shown the world what really happened in courtrooms across the country every day. Usually, there were no cameras to record. Usually there were no reporters to write about it. Usually, people like her suffered in silence and the system went on unchanged. But this time was different. Tamara walked to her kitchen table and picked up the business card the lawyer had given her. She looked at her law books stacked beside her laptop. She thought about Maya sleeping in the next room and the kind of world she wanted her daughter to grow up in. For the first time since the incident, Tamara felt something besides anger and humiliation. She felt hope. If she was going to be famous, she could use that attention for something good. If people were going to listen to her, she could speak up for others who had no voice. If she was going to be a symbol, she could be a symbol of change, instead of just a symbol of suffering. She picked up her phone and found the number for Robert Chen, the civil rights lawyer. It was late, but she knew lawyers worked strange hours. She sent him a text message. "Mr. Chen, this is Tamara Williams. I would like to meet with you tomorrow to discuss filing a lawsuit. What happened to me was wrong, and I want to make sure it never happens to anyone else." Then she sat down at her kitchen table and opened her constitutional law textbook again. But this time, she was not just reading about other people's fights for justice. She was preparing for her own. Tamara was starting to believe that those dreams. 3 years after the incident in Judge Harrison's courtroom, Tamara Williams walked across the stage at her law school graduation. She wore a black cap and gown, and Maya sat in the front row cheering loudly when her name was called. At 28, she had finally achieved her dream of becoming a lawyer. The bar exam was the next challenge. For 2 months, Tamara studied harder than she had ever studied before. She took practice tests every day and memorized hundreds of legal rules. Maya, now 9 years old, helped by making flashcards and quizzing her mother on legal terms. When the results came out, Tamara's hands shook as she opened the email. "Congratulations," it read. "You have passed the bar examination." She screamed with joy and hugged Maya so tight that her daughter laughed and asked for air. Now she needed a job. Many of her classmates were going to work for big law firms that paid high salaries. But Tamara had a different goal. She wanted to help people who could not afford expensive lawyers. She applied to the public defender's office. The public defender's office represented people who were accused of crimes but could not pay for their own lawyers. The work was hard and the pay was low, but it was exactly what Tamara wanted to do. She knew what it felt like to be powerless in the legal system. Her first day at work was both exciting and scary. The office was busy and chaotic. Lawyers rushed around carrying thick files. Phones rang constantly. Clients sat in the waiting room looking worried and confused. Tamara's supervisor was Maria Santos, a tough woman who had been a public defender for 15 years. Maria had short gray hair and wore glasses that made her look like a stern teacher. But she was kind to the people she represented and fought hard for them in court. "Williams," Maria said on Tamara's first day, "you're going to learn fast here. We have too many cases and not enough time. You'll be handling misdemeanor cases to start, small crimes like shoplifting, drug possession, and traffic violations." Tamara's first client was a 19-year-old boy named Marcus who had been arrested for stealing food from a grocery store. He was thin and looked hungry. His clothes were dirty and too big for him. "Why did you take the food?" Tamara asked him during their meeting. "My little sister was hungry," Marcus said quietly. "We've been staying in my car since we got kicked out of our apartment. I ain't got no money for food." Tamara's heart ached for this young man. She saw herself in his situation, desperate and just trying to survive. She worked hard on his case, negotiating with the prosecutor to get him community service instead of jail time. She also connected him with social services that could help him find housing and food assistance. When the judge agreed to the deal, Marcus started to cry. "Thank you, Ms. Williams. You're the first person in a long time who treated me like I mattered." That moment reminded Tamara why she had become a lawyer. It was not about winning cases or making money. It was about treating people with dignity and fighting for justice. Over the next year, Tamara handled hundreds of cases. She represented people who had been arrested for driving without a license because they could not afford to pay old tickets. She helped mothers who had been charged with shoplifting diapers for their babies. She defended young people who had been caught with small amounts of marijuana. Most of her clients were poor. Many were people of color. Almost all of them felt like the system was stacked against them. Tamara understood their feelings because she had felt the same way. She started to notice patterns in how her clients were treated. Police officers were more likely to arrest poor people for things that rich people got warnings for. Judges gave harsher sentences to people who could not afford bail and had to stay in jail before their trials. Prosecutors offered worse plea deals to people who had public defenders instead of private lawyers. These patterns made Tamara angry, but they also motivated her to work harder. She started preparing for cases more thoroughly than most public defenders had time for. She interviewed witnesses that other lawyers might have ignored. She researched laws that could help her clients avoid conviction. Her success rate was impressive. She won cases that other lawyers thought were hopeless. Word started to spread among her clients' families and friends that Tamara Williams was a public defender who really cared and who knew how to fight. One of her most important cases involved a woman named Linda Jackson. Linda was a 40-year-old, mother of 3 who worked as a housekeeper. She had been arrested for assault after getting into a fight with her neighbor. But when Tamara investigated the case, she discovered that Linda's neighbor had been harassing her family for months. The neighbor had called Linda racist names and had thrown trash in her yard. On the day of the fight, the neighbor had threatened to hurt Linda's children. She was just defending her family, Tamara explained to the prosecutor. Any mother would have done the same thing. The prosecutor was not interested in dropping the charges. He said Linda should have called the police instead of fighting. Tamara pointed out that Linda had called the police 3 times about the harassment, but they had never done anything to help her. The case went to trial. Tamara called witnesses who testified about the neighbor's harassment. She presented evidence of the racist phone calls and threatening letters. She argued that Linda had acted in self-defense. The jury took only 2 hours to find Linda not guilty. When the verdict was read, Linda hugged Tamara and whispered, "Thank you for believing me." That case got attention from local news reporters. They wrote articles about how Tamara had saved an innocent woman from going to jail. The articles mentioned that Tamara was the same woman who had been slapped by a police officer in court several years earlier. The publicity led to more clients seeking out Tamara specifically, but it also led to something else: attention from civil rights organizations. The NAACP asked Tamara to speak at their annual dinner about her experiences as both a victim of police brutality and a public defender. Standing at the podium in front of 300 people, Tamara felt nervous but determined. 5 years ago, I was slapped by a police officer for asking for fairness in court, she began. That moment changed my life, but not in the way the officer probably intended. Instead of making me afraid of the legal system, it made me determined to fix it. She talked about her clients and the challenges they faced. She explained how poverty and racism affected the way people were treated in court. She argued that everyone deserved a lawyer who would fight for them, regardless of how much money they had. The speech was recorded and shared on social media. Law schools invited her to speak to their students. Other public defender offices asked her to train their lawyers. Tamara was becoming known as an expert on defending poor clients and fighting police misconduct. Her success at work led to a promotion. Maria Santos made her the supervisor of the misdemeanor division. Now Tamara was not only handling her own cases, but also training new lawyers and making sure that all the office's clients got good representation. The civil lawsuit against Officer Martinez in the court system was finally resolved during Tamara's second year as a public defender. The city agreed to pay her $50,000 and to implement new training for court officers about how to treat people respectfully. $50,000 was not enough to make Tamara rich, but it was enough to pay off her student loans and put some money in savings for Maya's college fund. More importantly, the settlement included changes that would help other people avoid what happened to her. Officer Martinez was required to take anger management classes and sensitivity training. Judge Harrison was forced to attend a workshop on courtroom decorum and fair treatment of defendants. The court system implemented new policies about how officers should interact with people in courtrooms. "It's not perfect," Robert Chen told Tamara when they signed the settlement papers. "But it's progress. You've made it less likely that someone else will go through what you went through." Maya was now 11 years old and starting to understand what her mother did for work. She was proud that Tamara helped people who were in trouble. Sometimes she would ask about specific cases and Tamara would explain them in simple terms. "Mommy, why do police officers arrest people who steal food when they're hungry?" Maya asked one day. "That's a good question, baby. Sometimes the laws don't make sense and sometimes people who enforce the laws don't understand what it's like to be desperate. That's why we need good lawyers to help explain things to judges." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "When I grow up, I want to help people too." Tamara smiled and hugged her daughter. Maya was growing up to be a thoughtful, compassionate young woman. Despite all the challenges they had faced, Tamara felt like she was raising her daughter right. At work, Tamara continued to build her reputation as a fierce advocate for her clients. She took on more complex cases and started handling some felony charges. She also began writing articles for legal journals about how to better defend poor clients and how to address bias in the criminal justice system. Other lawyers started asking for her advice on difficult cases. Some private attorneys even referred clients to her when they felt the person could not afford their fees, but needed the kind of passionate representation that Tamara provided. One evening, as Tamara was leaving the office after a long day and might actually come true, 3 years after the incident in Judge Harrison's courtroom, Tamara Williams walked across the stage at her law school graduation. She wore a black cap and gown, and Maya sat in the front row cheering loudly when her name was called. At 28, she had finally achieved her dream of becoming a lawyer. The bar exam was the next challenge. For 2 months, Tamara studied harder than she had ever studied before. She took practice tests every day and memorized hundreds of legal rules. Maya, now 9 years old, helped by making flashcards and quizzing her mother on legal terms. When the results came out, Tamara's hands shook as she opened the email. "Congratulations," it read. "You have passed the bar examination." She screamed with joy and hugged Maya so tight that her daughter laughed and asked for air. Now she needed a job. Many of her classmates were going to work for big law firms that paid high salaries. But Tamara had a different goal. She wanted to help people who could not afford expensive lawyers. She applied to the Public Defender's Office. The Public Defender's Office represented people who were accused of crimes but could not pay for their own lawyers. The work was hard and the pay was low, but it was exactly what Tamara wanted to do. She knew what it felt like to be powerless in the legal system. Her first day at work was both exciting and scary. The office was busy and chaotic. Lawyers rushed around carrying thick files. Phones rang constantly. Clients sat in the waiting room looking worried and confused. Tamara's supervisor was Maria Santos, a tough woman who had been a public defender for 15 years. Maria had short gray hair and wore glasses that made her look like a stern teacher. But she was kind to the people she represented and fought hard for them in court. "Williams," Maria said on Tamara's first day, "you're going to learn fast here. We have too many cases and not enough time. You'll be handling misdemeanor cases to start, small crimes like shoplifting, drug possession, and traffic violations. Tamara's first client was a 19-year-old boy named Marcus, who had been arrested for stealing food from a grocery store. He was thin and looked hungry. His clothes were dirty and too big for him. "Why did you take the food?" Tamara asked him during their meeting. "My little sister was hungry," Marcus said quietly. "We've been staying in my car since we got kicked out of our apartment. I ain't got no money for food." Tamara's heart ached for this young man. She saw herself in his situation, desperate and just trying to survive. She worked hard on his case, negotiating with the prosecutor to get him community service instead of jail time. She also connected him with social services that could help him find housing and food assistance. When the judge agreed to the deal, Marcus started to cry. "Thank you, Ms. Williams. You're the first person in a long time who treated me like I mattered." That moment reminded Tamara why she had become a lawyer. It was not about winning cases or making money. It was about treating people with dignity and fighting for justice. Over the next year, Tamara handled hundreds of cases. She represented people who had been arrested for driving without a license because they could not afford to pay old tickets. She helped mothers who had been charged with shoplifting diapers for their babies. She defended young people who had been caught with small amounts of marijuana. Most of her clients were poor. Many were people of color. Almost all of them felt like the system was stacked against them. Tamara understood their feelings because she had felt the same way. She started to notice patterns in how her clients were treated. Police officers were more likely to arrest poor people for things that rich people got warnings for. Judges gave harsher sentences to people who could not afford bail and had to stay in jail before their trials. Prosecutors offered worse plea deals to people who had public defenders instead of private lawyers. These patterns made Tamara angry, but they also motivated her to work harder. She started preparing for cases more thoroughly than most public defenders had time for. She interviewed witnesses that other lawyers might have ignored. She researched laws that could help her clients avoid conviction. Her success rate was impressive. She won cases that other lawyers thought were hopeless. Word started to spread among her clients' families and friends that Tamara Williams was a public defender who really cared and who knew how to fight. One of her most important cases involved a woman named Linda Jackson. Linda was a 40-year-old, mother of 3 who worked as a housekeeper. She had been arrested for assault after getting into a fight with her neighbor. But when Tamara investigated the case, she discovered that Linda's neighbor had been harassing her family for months. The neighbor had called Linda racist names and had thrown trash in her yard. On the day of the fight, the neighbor had threatened to hurt Linda's children. She was just defending her family, Tamara explained to the prosecutor. Any mother would have done the same thing. The prosecutor was not interested in dropping the charges. He said Linda should have called the police instead of fighting. Tamara pointed out that Linda had called the police 3 times about the harassment, but they had never done anything to help her. The case went to trial. Tamara called witnesses who testified about the neighbor's harassment. She presented evidence of the racist phone calls and threatening letters. She argued that Linda had acted in self-defense. The jury took only 2 hours to find Linda not guilty. When the verdict was read, Linda hugged Tamara and whispered, "Thank you for believing me." That case got attention from local news reporters. They wrote articles about how Tamara had saved an innocent woman from going to jail. The articles mentioned that Tamara was the same woman who had been slapped by a police officer in court several years earlier. The publicity led to more clients seeking out Tamara specifically, but it also led to something else: attention from civil rights organizations. The NAACP asked Tamara to speak at their annual dinner about her experiences as both a victim of police brutality and a public defender. Standing at the podium in front of 300 people, Tamara felt nervous but determined. 5 years ago, I was slapped by a police officer for asking for fairness in court, she began. That moment changed my life, but not in the way the officer probably intended. Instead of making me afraid of the legal system, it made me determined to fix it. She talked about her clients and the challenges they faced. She explained how poverty and racism affected the way people were treated in court. She argued that everyone deserved a lawyer who would fight for them, regardless of how much money they had. The speech was recorded and shared on social media. Law schools invited her to speak to their students. Other public defender offices asked her to train their lawyers. Tamara was becoming known as an expert on defending poor clients and fighting police misconduct. Her success at work led to a promotion. Maria Santos made her the supervisor of the misdemeanor division. Now Tamara was not only handling her own cases, but also training new lawyers and making sure that all the office's clients got good representation. The civil lawsuit against Officer Martinez and the court system was finally resolved during Tamara's second year as a public defender. The city agreed to pay her $50,000 and to implement new training for court officers about how to treat people respectfully. $50,000 was not enough to make Tamara rich, but it was enough to pay off her student loans and put some money in savings for Maya's college fund. More importantly, the settlement included changes that would help other people avoid what happened to her. Officer Martinez was required to take anger management classes and sensitivity training. Judge Harrison was forced to attend a workshop on courtroom decorum and fair treatment of defendants. The court system implemented new policies about how officers should interact with people in courtrooms. "It's not perfect," Robert Chen told Tamara when they signed the settlement papers, "but it's progress. You've made it less likely that someone else will go through what you went through." Maya was now 11 years old and starting to understand what her mother did for work. She was proud that Tamara helped people who were in trouble. Sometimes she would ask about specific cases and Tamara would explain them in simple terms. "Mommy, why do police officers arrest people who steal food when they're hungry?" Maya asked one day. "That's a good question, baby. Sometimes the laws don't make sense, and sometimes people who enforce the laws don't understand what it's like to be desperate. That's why we need good lawyers to help explain things to judges." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "When I grow up, I want to help people too." Tamara smiled and hugged her daughter. Maya was growing up to be a thoughtful, compassionate young woman. Despite all the challenges they had faced, Tamara felt like she was raising her daughter right. At work, Tamara continued to build her reputation as a fierce advocate for her clients. She took on more complex cases and started handling some felony charges. She also began writing articles for legal journals about how to better defend poor clients and how to address bias in the criminal justice system. Other lawyers started asking for her advice on difficult cases. Some private attorneys even referred clients to her when they felt the person could not afford their fees, but needed the kind of passionate representation that Tamara provided. One evening, as Tamara was leaving the office after a long day in court, Maria Santos pulled her aside. 2 years later, the news that everyone had been waiting for finally came. Judge Richard Harrison announced that he would retire at the end of his term. After 25 years on the bench, he was stepping down to spend more time with his grandchildren. The announcement sent ripples through the legal community. Harrison's seat was one of the most important in the county. Whoever replaced him would make decisions that affected thousands of people every year. Tamara was in her office when Maria Santos burst through the door with a newspaper in her hand. "Did you see this?" Maria asked excitedly. "Harrison is retiring. This is your chance, Tamara." Tamara read the article carefully. The election would be held in 18 months. Any lawyer who had been practicing for at least 5 years could run. Tamara had been a lawyer for exactly 5 years. "I don't know if I'm ready," Tamara said. "Running for judge is a big deal. I've never run for any office before." "Nobody is ever ready," Maria replied. "But you're the right person for this job. You understand what it's like to be on both sides of the legal system. You know how to treat people fairly." That evening, Tamara talked to Maya about the possibility of running for judge. Maya was now 13 years old and much more aware of politics and current events. "Would you really get to be the judge in the same courtroom where that police officer hit you?" Maya asked. "Yes, that's Judge Harrison's courtroom." Maya thought about this for a moment. "I think you should do it, Mom. You could make sure that never happens to anyone else." Over the next few weeks, Tamara talked to many people about whether she should run. Robert Chen, the lawyer who had handled her lawsuit, was enthusiastic about the idea. "You would bring a unique perspective to the bench," he told her. "Most judges come from prosecutor offices or big law firms. They don't really understand what life is like for regular people." Dr. Sarah Mitchell, her former law professor, agreed. Tamara, you have something that can't be taught in law school. Real experience with how the system affects ordinary people. That would make you an excellent judge. But not everyone was supportive. Some people in the legal community whispered that Tamara was too young and inexperienced. Others said that her background as a public defender would make her too soft on crime. A few even suggested that she was only being considered because of her race and gender. These comments hurt, but they also motivated Tamara. She had faced doubt and discrimination before. She knew that some people would never see her as qualified no matter what she accomplished. 3 other lawyers announced they were also running for Harrison's seat. The most serious challenger was David Morrison, a prosecutor who had been working in the district attorney's office for 15 years. Morrison was white, male, and came from a wealthy family. He had the support of the police union and many business leaders. Another candidate was Jennifer Walsh, a private attorney who specialized in corporate law. She had never handled criminal cases, but she had connections with wealthy donors who could fund her campaign. The third candidate was Miguel Rodriguez, a defense attorney like Tamara. But Rodriguez had been practicing for 20 years and had more experience with high-profile cases. When Tamara officially announced her candidacy, she held a press conference at the courthouse steps, the same steps where she had sat crying after being slapped by Officer Martinez 8 years earlier. I am running for judge because I believe that everyone who enters a courtroom deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, she said to the crowd of reporters and supporters. I have seen the legal system from many different angles, as a defendant, as a law student, as a public defender, and as a supervisor training other lawyers. I know what it feels like to be powerless in court, and I know how important it is to have a judge who listens and cares. The campaign was harder than anything Tamara had ever done. She had to raise money, which was difficult because she did not know many wealthy people. She had to give speeches at events all over the county. She had to debate the other candidates on television and radio. Most challenging of all, she had to defend her record as a public defender. Morrison's campaign attacked her for letting criminals go free and being soft on crime. They brought up some of her cases where she had gotten charges reduced or dismissed. Ms. Williams cares more about protecting drug dealers and thieves than she does about keeping our community safe, Morrison said during one debate. Tamara was ready for this attack. She had prepared carefully for these moments. Mr. Morrison, I have spent my career making sure that everyone gets a fair trial, which is what the Constitution requires, she responded. When I got charges dismissed, it was because the police had violated someone's rights or because the person was innocent. That's not being soft on crime, that's upholding the law. She went on to explain some of her cases in detail. She talked about Marcus, the young man who had stolen food because he was homeless and hungry. She described Linda Jackson, who had been charged with assault for defending her children from a racist neighbor. These are real people with real problems, Tamara said. A good judge looks at the whole situation, not just the charges on paper. The campaign revealed ugly truths about politics that Tamara had never experienced before. Someone spray-painted racist words on her campaign signs. She received anonymous phone calls with threats. A few businesses refused to let her put up signs in their windows, but for every negative experience, there were positive ones too. Hundreds of people volunteered to help with her campaign. Former clients and their families donated small amounts of money and helped distribute flyers. Community groups endorsed her candidacy. Maya was a huge help during the campaign. She helped stuff envelopes with campaign materials. She went door to door with her mother, talking to voters about why they should support Tamara. At 13, Maya was articulate and passionate about her mother's candidacy. My mom has always fought for people who needed help, Maya would tell voters. She became a lawyer because she wanted to make sure everyone gets treated fairly in court. The debates were some of the most stressful parts of the campaign. Tamara had to study policy positions on dozens of issues. She had to learn about court administration, budget management, and judicial procedures that she had never dealt with as a lawyer. During one particularly difficult debate, Morrison tried to make Tamara look inexperienced by asking her technical questions about court scheduling and case management. Ms. Williams, how would you handle the backlog of cases that currently exists in our court system? He asked. Tamara had prepared for this question. Mr. Morrison, the backlog exists partly because too many people are sitting in jail waiting for trial because they can't afford bail. As a public defender, I've seen people plead guilty to crimes they didn't commit just to get out of jail faster than they could get a trial. We need more efficient scheduling, but we also need to address the root causes of delay. Her answer impressed many people because it showed that she understood the problems from a practical perspective, not just a theoretical one. As the election approached, polls showed that the race was very close. Morrison had an early lead because of his name recognition and endorsements from law enforcement groups, but Tamara was gaining ground, especially among younger voters and communities of color. The final debate was held 2 weeks before the election. By this point, Tamara was much more comfortable speaking in public and debating her opponents. She had found her voice as a candidate. When asked about her qualifications, Tamara gave what many people considered the best answer of the entire campaign. My opponents have more years of experience than I do, she said, but I have a different kind of experience that is just as valuable. I know what it feels like to stand in front of a judge when you're scared and powerless. I know what it's like to work 3 jobs and still struggle to pay your bills. I know what it's like to be treated unfairly because of how you look or where you come from. She paused and looked directly into the camera. A judge's job is not just to know the law. It's to understand people and to make sure that everyone who comes before the court is treated with fairness and dignity. That's the kind of judge I will be. The last 2 weeks of the campaign were a blur of activities. Tamara visited senior centers, attended community meetings, and walked through neighborhoods talking to voters. She barely slept and lived on coffee and sandwiches. Maya had to take on more responsibilities at home, making her own meals and doing her homework without help. She never complained, understanding how important this election was to her mother and to their community. 3 days before the election, an unexpected endorsement came that changed everything. The local newspaper, which had been neutral in the race, published an editorial supporting Tamara's candidacy. Tamara Williams represents a new generation of leadership in our court system, the editorial read. Her experience as a public defender has given her insights into the real-world impact of judicial decisions. Her personal experience with the legal system has taught her the importance of treating all people with respect and dignity. She is the right choice to bring fairness and justice to our courts. The endorsement was reprinted and shared thousands of times on social media. It gave Tamara's campaign momentum going into the final days before the election. On election day, Tamara woke up early and voted at H. The first election results came in at 8 o'clock that Tuesday evening. Tamara sat in her small campaign office surrounded by volunteers, Maya and close friends who had supported her throughout the long campaign. The room was decorated with blue and white balloons and a banner that read, "Williams for Judge." Maria Santos had brought pizza for everyone, but Tamara was too nervous to eat. She kept checking her phone for updates from precincts around the county. Maya sat next to her mother, squeezing her hand whenever new numbers appeared on the television screen. In the race for county judge, with 15% of precincts reporting, David Morrison leads with 38% of the vote. Tamara Williams has 34%, Miguel Rodriguez has 20%, and Jennifer Walsh has 8%, the news anchor announced. The room went quiet. Tamara felt her stomach drop. She had hoped to take an early lead, but Morrison was ahead just as many people had predicted. "It's still early, Mom," Maya whispered. "Remember what you always tell me about not giving up." Robert Chen, who had become one of Tamara's closest advisors during the campaign, tried to keep everyone calm. The first precincts to report are usually from areas where Morrison was expected to do well. Let's wait for more results before we worry. As the evening progressed, the numbers kept changing. By 9 o'clock, Morrison still led, but his margin was shrinking. Tamara had moved up to 36% while Morrison dropped to 37%. With 40% of precincts reporting, the anchor said, "This race is too close to call." Morrison maintains a narrow lead, but Williams is gaining ground in urban areas and communities with high minority populations. The volunteers in the Bay room started to get excited. Carmen, Tamara's best friend who had helped organize phone banks, jumped up and cheered. "You're catching up, girl. I told you this would happen." By 10 o'clock, something remarkable was happening. Tamara had taken the lead for the first time all evening. She was now at 39%, while Morrison had dropped to 37%. "I can't believe this is really happening," Tamara said to Maya. 8 years ago, I was just trying to pay a traffic ticket. Now I might actually become a judge." Maya smiled proudly. "I always knew you would win, Mom. You're the best lawyer in the whole world." The room erupted in cheers when the 11 o'clock update showed Tamara's lead growing. She now had 42% of the vote compared to Morrison's 36%. With 80% of precincts reporting, it was becoming clear that she was going to win. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Tamara's former law professor, had driven 2 hours to be at the election night party. She found Tamara in the crowd and gave her a big hug. "Tamara, I am so proud of you," Dr. Mitchell said with tears in her eyes. "You've proven that hard work and determination can overcome any obstacle." At 11:30, Morrison called Tamara to concede the election. The room fell silent as she answered her phone. "Congratulations, Judge Williams," Morrison said formally. "You ran a good campaign. I wish you the best of luck in office." "Thank you, Mr. Morrison," Tamara replied. "I hope we can work together to improve our court system for everyone." When she hung up the phone, the room exploded in celebration. People were hugging, crying, and cheering. Someone started playing music. Maya jumped into her mother's arms and held her tight. "Ladies and gentlemen," Robert Chen announced loudly, "I present to you the next county judge, Tamara Williams." The final results showed that Tamara had won with 44% of the vote. Morrison finished second with 35%. Rodriguez got 18% and Walsh received 3%. Tamara had won by nearly 10 percentage points, a decisive victory that surprised many political experts. At midnight, Tamara stood before the crowd of supporters, volunteers, and reporters who had gathered at her campaign headquarters. Maya stood beside her, holding her hand and beaming with pride. 2 months ago, people told me I was too young to be a judge," Tamara began. "They said I didn't have enough experience. They said voters wouldn't support someone like me." She paused and looked around the room at all the faces that had believed in her when others did not. "Well, tonight you proved them wrong," she continued. "This victory belongs to all of you who knocked on doors, made phone calls, and donated your time and money to this campaign. This victory belongs to everyone who believes that our court system should treat all people with fairness and dignity." The crowd cheered loudly. Tamara waited for the noise to die down before continuing. "I want to be clear about something," she said, her voice getting stronger. "This campaign was never about me getting revenge on the people who treated me badly 8 years ago. This was about making sure that what happened to me never happens to anyone else." She talked about her plans as judge. She promised to treat everyone who came before her court with respect, regardless of their background or financial situation. She pledged to work on reducing the backlog of cases and making the court system more efficient. She committed to being fair to both prosecutors and defense attorneys. "Most importantly," Tamara said, "I promise to remember every day that the decisions I make affect real people's lives. I will never forget what it feels like to be powerless in a courtroom." After her speech, Tamara spent another hour talking to reporters and thanking supporters. Local television stations were calling it a historic victory. She would become the youngest African-American woman ever elected to the county bench. Around 2 in the morning, the campaign office finally started to empty out. Tamara and Maya were among the last to leave. As they walked to their car, Maya looked up at her mother. "Mom, do you remember that picture I drew of you as a judge when I was little?" "Of course I remember. I still have it hanging in my office." "I'm glad I was right," Maya said with a sleepy smile. The next morning, Tamara woke up to find dozens of messages on her phone. News stations wanted interviews. Newspapers wanted quotes. Legal organizations wanted to congratulate her. The story of Her victory was picked up by national news outlets. Cable news shows discussed her background and what her election meant for the criminal justice system. Law schools invited her to speak to their students about her journey from defendant to judge. But the most meaningful message came from Mrs. Rodriguez, their elderly neighbor who had watched Maya after school for so many years. "Mija," the text message read, "I am so proud of you. You have shown the whole world that anything is possible in America if you work hard and never give up. Your parents would be so proud." Over the next few weeks, Tamara had to prepare for the transition to her new job. She would be sworn in as judge in January, about 2 months after the election. She needed to learn about court administration, budget management, and dozens of other responsibilities that judges handled beyond just hearing cases. The current court administrator, a woman named Patricia Stevens, helped Tamara understand the practical aspects of running a courtroom. Patricia had worked in the court system for 25 years and knew everything about scheduling cases, managing staff, and dealing with lawyers. Judge Harrison was very traditional in how he ran his courtroom, Patricia explained during one of their meetings. He was strict about procedure and didn't like it when lawyers took too much time with their arguments. "I want to be fair but efficient," Tamara replied. "I want people to feel like they're being heard, but I also want to keep cases moving." Tamara also met with other judges in the county to learn from their experience. Most of them were supportive and offered helpful advice. Judge Carol Martinez, who had been on the bench for 12 years, was particularly helpful. "The hardest part of being a judge is making decisions that affect people's lives every day," Judge Martinez told her. "You'll have to send some people to jail and you'll have to take children away from their parents sometimes. Those decisions will weigh on you, but you have to remember that you're doing what the law requires." As her swearing-in ceremony approached, Tamara reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this point. 8 years earlier, she had been a struggling law student who got slapped by a police officer for asking for fairness. Now, she was about to become the person with the power to ensure that everyone in her courtroom was treated fairly. The ceremony was scheduled for January 15th in the same courtroom where Judge Harrison had presided for 25 years. It was the same courtroom where Officer Martinez had struck her across the face. Now she would sit behind that same judge's bench, making decisions that affected thousands of people's lives. Maya had grown into a confident 15-year-old who was proud of her mother's accomplishments. She had been accepted to a prestigious high school, where she planned to study government and political science. Like her mother, she was interested in public service and helping others. "Mom," Maya said one evening as they prepared for the swearing-in ceremony, "what are you going to do on your first day as judge?" Tamara thought about the question carefully. "I'm going to start each day by remembering why I wanted this job in the first place, and I'm going to make sure that everyone who comes into my courtroom feels like their voice matters." The night before her swearing-in, Tamara walked through the courthouse after hours. The building was quiet and empty. She made her way to Judge Harrison's old courtroom and sat in the spectator section where she had sat 8 years earlier as a defendant. She looked 15 years had passed since that cold Tuesday morning when Officer Martinez's hand struck Tamara Williams across the face in Judge Harrison's courtroom. Now, on a warm Thursday afternoon in May, Judge Tamara Williams sat behind that same bench, presiding over her courtroom with quiet dignity and unwavering fairness. The courtroom looked different than it had during Judge Harrison's time. The harsh fluorescent lights had been replaced with warmer lighting. Tamara had added comfortable chairs in the waiting area and hung inspirational quotes about justice on the walls. Most importantly, she had installed a sign near the entrance that read, "All people who enter this courtroom will be treated with respect and dignity." Judge Williams had developed a reputation throughout the county as a fair but firm judge who listened carefully to everyone who appeared before her. Lawyers respected her knowledge of the law and her thoughtful approach to difficult cases. Defendants appreciated that she took time to understand their situations before making decisions. Maya, now 28 years old, sat in the gallery watching her mother work. She had followed in 15 years had passed since that cold Tuesday morning when Officer Martinez's hand struck Tamara Williams across the face in Judge Harrison's courtroom. Now, on a warm Thursday afternoon in May, Judge Tamara Williams sat behind that same bench, presiding over her courtroom with quiet dignity and unwavering fairness. The courtroom looked different than it had during Judge Harrison's time. The harsh, fluorescent lights had been replaced with warmer lighting. Tamara had added comfortable chairs in the waiting area and hung inspirational quotes about justice on the walls. Most importantly, she had installed a sign near the entrance that read, "All people who enter this courtroom will be treated with respect and dignity." Judge Williams had developed a reputation throughout the county as a fair but firm judge who listened carefully to everyone who appeared before her. Lawyers respected her knowledge of the law and her thoughtful approach to difficult cases. Defendants appreciated that she took time to understand their situations before making decisions. Maya, now 28 years old, sat in the gallery watching her mother work. She had followed in her mother's footsteps and become a civil rights lawyer, specializing in police misconduct cases. Today was special because she was observing the courtroom where her mother's journey to justice had begun. Judge Williams was hearing a case involving a young man named Kevin who had been charged with shoplifting. As she listened to the prosecutor describe the charges, Tamara remembered her first client as a public defender, Marcus, who had stolen food because he was homeless and hungry. "Your Honor," the prosecutor said, "Mr. Thompson was caught stealing baby formula and diapers from the grocery store. The store manager wants to press full charges." Tamara looked at Kevin Thompson, who appeared to be about 19 years old. His clothes were clean but worn. He looked nervous and kept glancing toward the gallery where a young woman sat holding a baby. "Mr. Thompson," Judge Williams said gently, "do you have an attorney?" "No, Your Honor, I can't afford one. The court will appoint a public defender to represent you. But first, I'd like to understand why you took these items. Were you planning to sell them?" Kevin looked down at his hands. "No, Your Honor. The baby formula and diapers were for my daughter. She's 3 months old. I lost my job 2 weeks ago and we ran out of formula. I know stealing was wrong, but she was hungry and crying, and I didn't know what else to do." The courtroom was quiet. Tamara saw herself in this young father, desperate, afraid, and just trying to take care of his child. "Mr. Thompson, I'm going to continue this case for 2 weeks to give you time to meet with your attorney. In the meantime, I want you to speak with our court social worker about resources that might help you find work and assistance with baby supplies." She turned to the prosecutor. "I'd like you to consider whether criminal charges are really appropriate in this case. This appears to be a father trying to feed his child, not someone looking to profit from theft." After Kevin left the courtroom, the next case was called. Tamara was surprised to see a familiar name on the docket. "The People versus Officer Luis Martinez," the clerk announced. Tamara's heart skipped a beat. After all these years, Officer Martinez was appearing in her courtroom. He was now 45 years old, with gray hair around his temples. He had gained weight and looked tired. He was facing charges for excessive force during an arrest 6 months earlier. Martinez's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty to all charges." Judge Williams looked at Officer Martinez carefully. He avoided making eye contact with her, staring down at the defense table instead. She wondered if he remembered her from that day 15 years ago. "This case is set for trial in 6 weeks, Judge Williams said in a calm, professional voice. "Both sides will have adequate time to prepare their arguments. Officer Martinez, you are released on your own recognizance with the condition that you have no contact with the alleged victim." As Martinez left the courtroom, he glanced up at Judge Williams for just a moment. Their eyes met briefly, and she saw a flicker of recognition in his face. He looked away quickly and hurried out of the room. Maya approached the bench after the court session ended. "Mom, was that the same officer who hit you?" "Yes, it was." "How did it feel to see him in your courtroom?" Tamara thought about the question. 15 years ago, I probably would have wanted revenge. But now I just feel sad for him. He's facing serious charges that could end his career. I don't take any pleasure in that. Will you recuse yourself from his case because of your history with him?" "I'm considering it. I want to make sure he gets a fair trial, and some people might question whether I can be impartial." That evening, Tamara sat in her study at home, looking at the framed newspaper clippings on her wall. There was the article about her election as judge, a photo of her swearing-in ceremony, and several stories about important cases she had handled. But the most prominent spot on the wall was reserved for Maya's childhood drawing of her mother as a judge. Next to it hung Tamara's law school diploma and a photo of her receiving an award from the State Bar Association for her work improving the court system. Tamara had used her position as judge to implement many reforms. She had created a program that connected defendants with social services to address underlying problems like addiction, mental illness, and poverty. She had established a special court for veterans who got into legal trouble because of PTSD or other service-related issues. Most importantly, she had trained all court staff on how to treat people with respect and dignity. The days of defendants being yelled at or physically mistreated in her courtroom were over. Maya knocked on the study door and came in with 2 cups of tea. "I brought you some chamomile. You look like you're thinking hard about something." "I've been thinking about Officer Martinez's case. I've decided to recuse myself and let another judge handle it." "Really? Why?" "Because justice isn't about getting revenge on people who wronged you. It's about making sure everyone gets a fair trial, even people you don't like. Officer Martinez deserves a judge who can be completely impartial." Maya smiled. "That's exactly why people respect you so much as a judge. You always do the right thing, even when it's difficult." The next week, Judge Williams announced that she was recusing herself from Officer Martinez's case due to their prior history. Judge Carol Martinez, no relation to the defendant, would handle the trial instead. Some people criticized Tamara's decision, saying that she should have been the one to judge the man who had assaulted her. But most legal experts praised her for putting fairness above personal feelings. The trial took place 2 months later. Officer Martinez was found guilty of excessive force and sentenced to 6 months in jail and 2 years of probation. He was also fired from the police department and banned from working in law enforcement. Tamara read about the verdict in the newspaper, but felt no satisfaction from it. She was glad that justice had been served, but she took no joy in seeing someone's career destroyed. A few weeks after the trial, Tamara received an unexpected letter. It was from Officer Martinez. "Dear Judge Williams," it read, "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I'm sorry for what I did to you 15 years ago. Watching you become a respected judge while my own career ended in disgrace has made me realize how wrong I was. You deserved better treatment that day, and I'm ashamed of my actions. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me someday. Sincerely, Louis Martinez." Tamara read the letter several times. She felt a mix of emotions: anger about the past, sadness about wasted lives, and hope about the possibility of redemption. She decided to write back. "Dear Mr. Martinez," she wrote, "I appreciate your apology. What happened between us was painful, but it led me to become the person I am today. I don't excuse what you did, but I do forgive you. I hope you can use this experience to become a better person and find a way to contribute positively to society. Sincerely, Judge Tamara Williams." On the anniversary of her first day as judge, the local bar association held a dinner to honor Judge Williams for her 15 years of service, Lawyers Court.